From the Mapleview Animal Hospital studios, this is the WHTC Morning News with Gary Stevens and Peg McNichol on 99.7, 1450 WHTC and WHTC.com.
And we welcome you back to the WHTC Morning News for this Thursday, June the 25th. Zeeland Congressman Bill Huizenga on the other end of our Zoom connection. Bill, we're 25. It's June 25th. We're 6 months away from Christmas. I don't know whether or not you want to think that far ahead or not, but yeah, 6 months away from Christmas.
Yeah, I can't. Well, one historical note that I did hear or read this morning is this is the 70th anniversary of the start of the Korean War, Korean conflict, and amazing, a generation plus later, yet we are still dealing with the after effects of that, and it reminds me of the opportunity I had to go to the DMZ, that area right on the border, and the conflict that's still very much alive, and that's something that still is. We've been talking about so many other things and domestic things mostly, but we're starting to see a little more saber rattling again from Kim Jong-un in North Korea. But so historical note for the day.
And not just today, but as I mentioned a little bit earlier on the show today, Bill, is the fact that, this is the forgotten conflict. I mean, we talk about the greatest generation in World War II. We also talk about the Vietnam conflict, obviously, and Desert Storm, Desert Shield, what happens in Afghanistan. Korean conflict outside of MASH basically has been overlooked, I think, by history.
Yeah, in many ways it has. It was a couple of years ago. The groups like Talons Out and Honor Flights started adding Korean War veterans. Obviously, they've been seeing so many of the World War II veterans pass away, and they started adding those Korean War veterans. And I'm so glad that they did. And I had an opportunity to be with a number of them, and we would start at the World War II Memorial and either walk or sometimes push a wheelchair or a walker down the mall a little ways and go to see that Korean War conflict. And even for a number of those World War II veterans, many of them stayed in the military and went into the Korean conflict or into the occupation. Or they even if they didn't do that, they knew people that did, and it was just as emotional as anything I saw at those World War II memorials. And certainly we all know, if you mentally are at the World War II memorial, you look down to the west and you see the Lincoln Memorial. To the left or the south is that Korean War memorial. To the north, to the right is that gouge in the earth, that black granite Vietnam War memorial. It's a very emotional place for many of those men and women who have served our country.
I firmly agree. And of course, in the interest of transparency, my dad served in Korea. So, that conflict does have some personal aspects to me. And you talk about those who served in both World War II and Korea. One of the most notable was one baseball star named Ted Williams. He served our country well in both of those conflicts. But we're talking about the present with Zeeland Congressman Bill Huizenga, and you're one of the people that signed on board with the Justice Act. So what we're seeing now from the majority Democrats in the House, they're planning to move forward with a reform bill of its own today after Senate Democrats blocked that GOP effort in the upper chamber, sparked by nationwide protests against police brutality, would end qualified immunity for police, the Democratic proposal, and create a national database for officer misconduct, ending no-knock warrants and chokeholds. What's different from what you might have seen from the Democrats than what the Justice Act, which you and other Republicans are pushing forward in the House?
Yeah, let's talk about what happened with the Justice Act. That is in the Senate, originated in the Senate. The bill that I signed on to is the House companion to that. That was developed by Tim Scott, a very good friend of mine. Tim and I came in to the House of Representatives together in 2010. Tim is the first African American to be elected from the South since Reconstruction. And he's a very accomplished, very smart guy who obviously has a different perspective than someone like me because of where he grew up and what he had to go through. And Tim has had to endure some amazing things and very little of it good in this process because he has been called names, he's been threatened. He's had people like Nancy Pelosi and Dick Durbin call his efforts token, call him essentially a token effort into dealing with what's a significant problem with our country. And he had a great tweet in response to Dick Durbin, which was, so wait a minute, so you don't want the guy who's been racially profiled and pulled over by police and has been discriminated against to write this piece of legislation. Let's be clear, there's two African-American men in the Senate, Cory Booker from New Jersey, Tim Scott from South Carolina, and then obviously Kamala Harris, who is mixed race, but from California. So there is a dearth of African-American voices that are in the Senate, and Tim's voice is literally getting shoved aside when Gary Peters, Debbie Stabenow, Chuck Schumer, and others say that they don't even want to debate his bill, not even want to bring it up for debate. He accepted or offered to have it open to any amendment, and they still didn't want to do that. Why? Because they wanted the House to go first to sort of set the stage. Now, this is a bill, not what we're going to be voting on, the bill that I had co-sponsored, but a bill that has been written only by Nancy Pelosi, has not had any input from anyone from our side of the aisle. By the way, I believe that there's a lot of similarities between the bills in the substance when it comes to dealing with the training and the transparency and the ability to really get to these bad actors and these bad apples that are in law enforcement. Which again, it's important to note is a very small sliver of the population, but it's the other things that they go beyond, and they're trying to add in additional issues that don't really pertain to the racial conflict and the inequality that we're seeing with today. So that's the state of play, unfortunately. This has become political football. Nancy Pelosi had an outrageous statement when she said yesterday, when she said that the Republicans are trying to get away with murder. This is her quote. Republicans are trying to get away with murder, the murder of George Floyd. She ought to be ashamed of herself for saying that. She ought to be taken to task by the media, which she's not. When she was given an opportunity to sort of clarify, she doubled down on that yesterday, and that's outrageous. That's the kind of rhetoric that is out there that frankly shows me that this is more about the election in November than it is about dealing with race relations. And we've been having a tremendous number of very positive, sometimes tough, long conversations with African American leaders, elected and unelected, in our district. This is frustrating for a number of them as well. I had a conversation yesterday with an African American elected official in the 2nd district. I'm not going to get any more specific than that. I don't want to have this guy subject to internet ridicule on social media. But he was expressing frustration to me that we're not really getting at the heart of the issue, which has to be addressed with what's going on. And he's as frustrated as anybody else that this is turning into a political football.
A couple of things I just want to sort of clarify. National database for excessive force encounters bill. Is that something that Justice Act could be, or is that something that might be a little bit hard to deal with? There's a couple other things too.
Yeah, no. In fact, I've pulled up some of my notes on the Justice Act here, and there is enhanced training policy, making closing the law enforcement consent loophole, developing accessible disciplinary record system. So having that system. Now, here was something that was pointed out to a law enforcement official to us from the northern part of the district. Part of this database, for example, you have to fill out a pretty significant report anytime that a police officer discharges their weapon, anytime. And that certainly, if there's a discharge of a weapon at somebody, that ought to be done. This guy pointed out, though, that his county sheriff's department euthanizes over 200 deer per year after they're hit by cars. That would still qualify, and they have to fill out all of this paperwork for any time that there's a discharge of that. So we've got to get better at trying to distinguish exactly what we're going after here. Does that include tasers and that kind of thing? So I'm supportive of the concept. We just got to work out details on this.
Not only the situation involving any time a discharge, maybe for a deer or maybe an accidental discharge, they have to fill it out too.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, like the a couple of years ago where there was an accidental dropping by an officer in the restroom of the weapon that went off. They got to fill the paperwork out on that too.
Well, that's my understanding. Any time that there is a discharge of a weapon for any purpose, any reason, and it seems to me if it's very different, even with something that happened with an accidental versus having to euthanize an animal or something like that. But those are the kinds of details, Gary, that if we would actually have a regular order process where amendments could be offered, where discussion could happen, we could get at the heart of some of those things. And that's exactly what that's the frustrating thing is that's the kind of negotiation that happened with a lot of the COVID funding, but we're not seeing that with this, obviously.
Let me add one more thing to this entire process about legal liability, maybe ending and all that, or perhaps dealing with the issue. And I want to get the exact phrase here, so let me just roll over to my side on this. Dealing with qualified immunity. Nice on concept, but Bill, I have a funny feeling if you eliminate limited qualified immunity, that's going to skyrocket costs for handling a police department, similar to what we see maybe in the medical field as well. Malpractice and limited liability, it's going to be an extra cost on that regard.
Well, and beyond that, Gary, this is about bad actors being responsible for their bad actions. I think we all agree on that. The question is how do you get at that? When we've got a number of former sheriffs and law enforcement prosecutors that are in the House of Representatives, and we've had some very spirited conversations about this internally within the Republican caucus, because obviously we're not having the conversation with the larger organization. And one of them was saying, look, already at least in his state, if the officer is charged with like murder or with some of these other felonies, then that immunity disappears, and that's why you have settlements out of these cities, and they can go after some of these folks personally. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not sure exactly what some of those delineations are. But what I understand in their analysis of the bill that we're going to be voting on, this puts all of this personal liability onto those police officers. And one of these former sheriffs said, how do I look at my deputies and say, if you make a mistake out there or your partner makes a mistake out there, it's not intentional, not a premeditated, but a split-second decision that may or may not turn out to be the right one, you now have put your entire family livelihood on the line. and he said, I'm going to have a very difficult time getting people to go and serve in that function. So we've got to have some sort of limit on that liability properly. Again, nobody disagrees that we need to go after these bad actors, but the question is how do we do it effectively without literally putting cities into bankruptcy as well as individuals into bankruptcy?
Bill, I'm going to ask you and beg your indulgence because I want to get your thoughts. We're running a little long, and I appreciate you staying a little longer with us on this. I want to get your thoughts. I'm going to run the CBS News update that just came to our desk right now, and then I want to get your thoughts in light of the possibility of another stimulus package involving COVID. So let me play the CBS update about the jobs numbers and then get your thoughts on that as well.
CBS News special report. New jobless numbers are just in. Another 1.48 million people filed for unemployment benefits last week, little more than economists had expected. It does mark the 12th weekly drop in a row as businesses continue to reopen. Economist Joel Naroff.
The economy is reopening all across the nation, and millions of people are going back to work. That should reduce the number of people who are collecting unemployment checks. But if large numbers of workers are still losing their jobs, the level of unemployment will come down more slowly than hoped for.
A total of 47 million people have applied for unemployment since the pandemic began, among them workers at Disneyland. The company has just announced it's postponing a plan to reopen on July 17th because the state of California hasn't released guidelines yet. Disney blogger Dusty Sage.
This is very personal for me, and I'm very sad for all the people I know and work with who are out of work.
Dow futures down 203. CBS News special report. I'm Deborah Rodriguez.
Bill, thank you for listening to that. Your thoughts about the job numbers and a little bit of the impact as Congress thinks about and discusses maybe another stimulus package or another aid package stemming from COVID-19.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, the Wall Street Journal headline popped up on my phone when as you were talking about that, and their headline is "Unemployment Claims to Show Pace of Jobs Market Healing." And I think as was noted in the audio clip, those numbers are coming down. Are they still significant? Absolutely, they are. Just 5 months ago, we were at record low unemployment in every category across the board. And obviously, when a significant company, whether it's a manufacturer or whether it's Disney, as was noted in this audio clip, for us in Michigan, what does it look like for any of the tourism and entertainment? Restaurants obviously are being hampered by that. That this is still significant and serious. So we're going to have to look at what this means for unemployment benefits. What I don't want to do is continue to have these stories from employers who say we can't get enough people to come back to work to have a full shift. That's what I hear often. And so we've got to hit that balance between making sure that we're taking care of people that truly need that help and those that are choosing to sideline themselves because of the $600 a week federal kicker that's in there.
R-Zeeland Congressman Bill Huizenga joins us most Thursday mornings to talk about some of the issues of the day. Again, I appreciate you staying a little bit longer for our segment this morning. Here, get a couple of comments on some of the other things going on. If all goes well, let's do this again on my birthday next Thursday morning, and we'll talk then.
All right. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much. That's R-Zeeland Congressman Bill Huizenga on Real News Now, 99.7 and 1450 WHTC.